Good evening from Israel, and welcome to another Israel Insider with me, Ashley Perry. Um, I just want to reiterate what I said last week, but this week it's perhaps even more likely. There is a possibility that during this half an hour, there could be a siren in my area, in which case I will have to immediately log off. I am in the safe room, but obviously my family will have to join me and I will have to log off. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope there are no more sirens, but the likelihood is there will be, but hopefully at least not for the next half an hour. So the least surprising surprise came on Saturday morning when Israel and the US launched a joint operation in Iran. Yes, there was the joint operations. No one's really calling it a war. They're still calling it operations. I think there are legalistic reasons in the US and possibly even in Israel why they don't call it a war. But so these operations began on Saturday. And the war really, the conflict, the operations resulted from a number of Iranian mistakes, which had just sort of happened throughout the week. The first one is they really thought, the Iranians thought that they could string President Trump and his team along like they had many of his predecessors, Biden, Obama, and others, in endless negotiations, in, sort of iceberg level slowness, moving this way and that way. And they thought they had time in their hands. They could hold out. They could have another meeting to discuss this, to discuss that. But the remarkable thing is they just didn't seem to compromise even 1 inch. It comes out tonight that Steve Witkoff said, and others have said, that they made very generous offers to the Iranians that they could have enrichment for civilian purposes. They could have all sorts of offers to buy from their industry, et cetera, and they basically turned it down. They said, no, we have a natural right to enrichment, even though they've lied about it, and et cetera, gone against their commitments to the IEA. They basically did not come to the table with any sort of, intention to compromise, to meet the Americans, to avoid war. And it's clear that they didn't understand who they're dealing with. So when the day of negotiations, I think they were in Geneva so long ago now, even though it was less than a week, seemed to not move anything forward. There did seem to increase the likelihood of strikes in Israel, and many people in Israel who know people who were called up and this, that, and the other were not amazingly surprised when on Saturday morning, like in the summer last year, we got the warnings to immediately go into the shelter or to be very close to the shelter, which meant basically we were starting our attacks, and the government and the home front of the IDF wanted us to be as prepared as possible, to be in our bomb shelters, etc., etc. The second mistake was, and this is really remarkable considering everything that's happened with the attack on Nasrallah, on Hania, and all others, that the Ayatollah, the late Ayatollah Khamenei, basically was holding meetings every single Saturday in the same place with the same people, and didn't seem bothered by the fact that he was basically broadcasting to the Israelis and to the Americans how best to hit him. Apparently, there were a few Saturdays where they considered the strikes. Apparently, weather was one of the reasons to push off, and disagreements, etc., etc. But basically, these meetings went on, and Israel had the basic easy picking off of the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, and dozens of other senior Iranian leaders in one location. Quite a lot of ordnance was obviously dropped on that location, but still, it made for relatively easy pickings. Now we understand some of the elements of the Israeli intelligence, that we had broken into the Tehran traffic system for many years. There were many, many other things, some which can be said, some which can't, but we basically knew exactly where they were, when they were, who they were, and everything else. So that's another major mistake that the Iranians made. At the moment, or from the beginning of the war, there have been various stages, and there'll obviously be excuse me, quite a few other stages. But stage one, apart from taking out the Ayatollah and various levels, senior levels of the Iranian political and military security leadership, was to take out the air defenses. Once again, after the summer 12-day war last year, what we saw after a couple of days is Israel wants to be able to have a clear path through to Tehran, through to Western Iran, that they could continue bombing. So they took out very early on as many of the air defenses as possible. And now it seems, according to the US Secretary of War, and even some elements within the Israeli leadership, that we're within hours, perhaps days at most, of having absolute, complete, total air supremacy, not only of many of the ability to shoot down any of our pilots basically being disrupted, but even the small air force that Iran has today. There was really a historic moment when an Israeli F-35, the first in the world, took out an Iranian aircraft I don't know if it was a dogfight, but it's the first time in history an F-35 in actual combat action has taken out another plane. The first time Israel has engaged in a dogfight like that and taken out an enemy plane since the mid-1980s. So we're seeing many firsts at the moment, and it does seem like Israel pretty much has an open corridor to attack at will. The way it seems is Israel is able to attack the north and the west of the country, and the US is more focused on the south, the west, and the east, trying to intercept rocket launchers that are attacking some of the Gulf allies there. So it does seem that there's a sort of understanding, very close understanding, cooperation, exactly where the two air forces are basically doing their work. Stage two, which is already very much underway, is the ability to basically find and destroy ballistic missiles, not just ballistic missiles, ballistic missile launchers, and the ability to create more. There is a certain amount of surprise in Israel and the US about how Iran was able to recover a lot of its ballistic capabilities since the 12-day war last year. But again, it seems like Israel and the US are really making rapid work with the ballistic missiles program. They are still able to shoot. Today, they shot quite a few at Israel. But there are various reports that they, if they carry on the rate they're doing, and if the US and Israel Air Force carry on the rate that they are taking out the ballistic missiles program, it could be only a week, maximum two, until they're no longer able to shoot ballistic missiles, especially the long-range ones. The shorter range ones are being used against the Gulf neighbors. The UAE has actually suffered more missiles than even Israel, because it's really very close, and we're talking about short range ballistic missiles, whereas Israel is more medium range and harder to create and harder to make and harder to fire and harder to disguise, obviously. But Israel and the US are making quick work of that. And again, it does seem that the rate of ballistic missiles shot at Israel is decreasing day by day. That could be because of a lack of ability, or it could be because Iran understands that this is going to last more time than they originally thought. So they're trying to lengthen it a little bit. And there's also a theory that basically the Iranian military has been given if you can fire a ballistic missile, just fire it, because we don't know if we'll have a second opportunity strategy as well. The stage three, which we're starting to see now, is really an attempt to weaken Iran's military, but also the symbols of state repression, the Basij, the Revolutionary Guards, their bases. Israel took out quite a large base. I think it's northeast of Tehran today, which had was part of a wide apparatus that the Revolutionary Guards had used for various levels. But what we are seeing and what we're hearing is that the Basij and the Revolutionary Guards and other levels of domestic repression from the Iranian regime are learning from Gaza. What do I mean by that? Is that they are regrouping. I'm sure that this was decided ahead of time in places like hospitals, mosques, and schools, as we saw throughout Gaza. Hamas had embedded itself in these institutions for many years, and Iran understands the effect of public opinion. We already saw that a mistaken attack. We don't know exactly on a school which was within a Revolutionary Guards compound. We don't, the numbers that came out of Iran, which were parroted by the international media: 150 children killed, or at least 80 children killed, and the rest they haven't exactly said who they are, but it was within a military compound, which obviously is against international law. We don't know exactly what happened, who targeted it. I'm sure it wasn't targeted, and perhaps it was just secondary fire. But they immediately, the Iranian regime came out with all these crazy statistics, starting from 12 children going up again to dozens and dozens, or even 150. So the Iranian regime have learned from Hamas and Hezbollah, obviously their proxy, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. And they are embedding themselves in these in hospitals, in mosques and schools, because they understand the PR effect, and that they understand that it's more difficult for Israel and the US to attack. What we do know is, and people are asking where the mass protests, why aren't people taking the street? First of all, we should understand that with all these sorties going across, and Israel just launched its 11th sortie, Air Force sortie across Iran, and the US is also joining in. It's very hard to get to come to the streets, and in fact, the people have been told to stay at home for now. They've been told to hold on, to bunker down and wait. What we probably are expecting is at some point, when the US, Israel, or whoever's running the show, or the two of them, decide that the state, the regime has been weakened enough, especially its repression, these organs of repression, the Basij, the Revolutionary Guards, the police, etc. When they've been weakened enough, that is when perhaps they'll get the directive. There's a lot of talk that the Crown Prince Pahlavi has been is very much behind the scenes. He has a certain amount of support in Iran. It's not clear exactly how much. There's also talk, especially tonight, of some of the minorities being armed, principally the Kurds. We know that there's a huge Kurdish minority in Iraq, which borders or is very close to Iran. And there's also a large Kurdish minority in Iran. In fact, the Kurds themselves have said that they've started ground operations now. We don't know if that's true yet, but it shows that these are things that are being talked about. And there are reports that the US are arming the Kurds, that they've already been preparing them for such a thing. But there is some who are a little bit hesitant about that. They don't want to get into an ethnic war. They don't want to get into the disintegration of Iran in the same way as Iraq disintegrated after the Second Gulf War. But it seems to be there's too much chatter about this. And it does seem that if there is going to be an uprising, it probably will start from some of the minorities, which are more on the periphery in the country, which would make sense to start there. And also, if you look at some of the bombing sorties, there has been a concentration in the areas in the Kurdish region, specifically on the organs of repression, the Basij bases, the Revolutionary Guards. The third mistake, and arguably the biggest, that Iran is making at the moment, is it's targeting its Arab neighbors. It's actually, Iran has attacked more Arab countries in, 4 days than Israel has in, over eight decades, which is quite remarkable. They're just firing pretty much in every direction. The aim of that is really to try and press the US through these Gulf nations. This is a major mistake because they're just creating more and more anger, and they are becoming extremely isolated as a result. The next mistake, the fourth mistake, is really getting Hezbollah involved. It's clear from the beginning that Hezbollah would become involved. Israel, or the intelligence and security apparatus in Israel, assumed that Hezbollah would probably be pushed into some sort of smaller response, just targeting, shooting missiles at the north. But as of the last day or so, Hezbollah have actually been targeting Tel Aviv and the center of the country, which is quite surprising. And it's basically really playing into Israel's hands, because ever since there was a ceasefire on Israel's northern border, Israel has really wanted to do a lot more and really finish Hezbollah off. And now it gets that opportunity to do it. It is targeting Hezbollah all over the country. And as of earlier today, the IDF's Arabic spokesperson has basically told all civilians to leave the southern Lebanon and go across the Litani River. And Israel has actually put boots on the ground. It's invaded Lebanon in response to try and deal with Hezbollah once and for all. Hezbollah itself is extremely isolated. Even its Shiite supporters, its strongest allies in the past are really saying that they made a big mistake, and they are doing Iran's bidding and acting against Lebanese interests at this point. So Hezbollah are isolated, they're weakened, but there is still a concern in Israel about an infiltration, not just from the north, but also from the east and the south. There is a concern that something could come across a mass infiltration from Iraq. There's talk at the beginning of the Houthis, but that would involve going across Saudi Arabia, and that's quite a trek. But certainly there is concern about that. At the moment, remarkably, we haven't seen the Houthis get involved at all, but Saudi Arabia certainly is worried about the Houthis starting to attack Saudi Arabia, and they warn them very much about it. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. The big question that's come up this week and seems to have really, been addressed from all different parties is who started this war, who dragged who to the war. We heard Secretary of State Rubio saying, basically, we had to go to war, or we had to attack Iran because we knew the Israelis were going to do it, and we basically didn't want to be sitting ducks, so we had to go along with it. And that was the way it was phrased, or the way it was cut a little bit and thrown around social media, led all those sort of anti-Israel conservatives or Republicans or MAGA, the Tucker Carlsons, etc., to say, look, Israel is dragging America into war again. Thankfully, this was shot down by the president in his meeting with the Chancellor of Germany, where he basically said, not at all. We were not dragged into war. If anything, I dragged Israel into war. Prime Minister Netanyahu was on Fox News with Hannity, I think even before that or after that, and he basically said, anyone who knows President Trump knows he can't be dragged into anything. And that's really true. At the end of the day, this was greenlit by President Trump, and it will be red lit by President Trump. When he has decided it's enough, that will be it. And how do we know that's true? Because we saw it in the 12-day war. As soon as President Trump felt enough was enough, let's call it a day, and that was it. He called Netanyahu, and Netanyahu had to basically tell Israel's Air Force that were on their way to Iran to basically turn around. And that's pretty much what happened. So really this idea that Netanyahu dragged, a very strong personality into this war against Israel is just really absurd. But it is unfortunately one that the Israel haters, the anti-Semites on the far right and on the far left have jumped on. But obviously it's an absurd idea. But what we do know is that there is a clock on this. We do know at some point President Trump will say enough is enough. He will red light it. Some say it will come from regional allies, although at the moment they would like to see the Iranian regime, certainly their wings clipped, perhaps even toppled, but they don't want this disintegration of Iran. It's a very important neighbor to a lot of these Arab countries. It obviously controls a lot of natural resources, but just as importantly, what we're hearing is many of the US's allies in the region are nervous. If the Iranian regime is toppled, that will make Israel the regional hegemon, which will mean that Israel is the strongest party in the region. And that is a worry to a lot of the Arab countries, even if they are at the moment on the same side of Israel. They don't necessarily want to see Israel the strongest by far. At the moment, there has been this sort of trade-off. Iran has been a major power, especially through its proxies, projecting strength across the region, but also Israel is a very important and strong, and perhaps the strongest, but not by far. Without Iran, it will be the strongest by far. So that is something that concerns some of the Arab allies, and that's certainly something that President Trump will be hearing. So Israel knows it has to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible, because there will come a time. It won't be today, it won't be tomorrow. The American president and some of the others, Secretary of War, have talked about weeks. It probably will be at least another couple of weeks, but one never knows. If there's a mistake tomorrow, if something happens, at the moment, things are going extremely successful, so there's no real need to stop it. But again, something could happen and that could put the brakes on things. But at the moment, it does seem everything is going successfully, and we'll wait to see if the next stages are as run as smoothly as the first few. And with that, I'm going to go to some questions. The first one is from Carrie Hillebrand. Does it appear likely that the Gulf states will enter the campaign in more than a token capacity? Well, there is a token capacity, and they have entered a little bit. Qatar, we've seen, the Emiratis. Saudi Arabia hasn't yet. They have a significant aerial power, especially compared with many others in the region, and probably they've said that might change if the Houthis get involved. If also the Iranians have already attacked Aramco, which is the Saudi state oil fields. That's a casus belli. But at the moment, they're quite happy with what the US and Israel are doing. They don't need the complication of, flying alongside the Israelis at this point, especially against another Muslim nation. So they're quite happy to sit it out. But how long that remains true really remains to be seen. And basically, it's dependent on what happens on the ground. Marina Ingman asked, do you have information about the person of the son of Khomeini? Apparently, he has become the new Ayatollah. It's a very good question. In the last day, they were supposed to appoint a new Ayatollah. There was a ballot supposed to be held, and Israel actually bombed the Council of Sages in Qom, which is a very holy city. And basically, it didn't seem like the vote was able to take place. At first, they thought maybe they'd actually got quite a few of these Ayatollahs, or the religious leadership below the Ayatollah, but it doesn't seem like they were present at the time. But it really did send a message that, we can go after you as well, and we can control who and when a new leader is decided. We have heard rumors, largely from Iranian opposition groups, of the new Ayatollah, the new supreme leader, is the son of Ali Khamenei, the late supreme leader. His name escapes me at the moment, Mortesha or something like that. He has been groomed by his father for many years to take over. He has got very close relations with the Revolutionary Guards, which are the real power in Iran. Apparently, he's very corrupt. He owns hundreds of millions of dollars in Swiss bank accounts, in property in London, in even cruise liners in the Middle East, etc., etc. And he's also an extreme hardliner. Certainly wouldn't be any better than the previous Ayatollah. We don't know if he has been appointed. He certainly is one that Israel and the US have paid special attention to. But it's unclear whether he will actually take over as supreme leader. Obviously, Israel and the US and its allies are paying special attention to this. There are voices within the Iranian leadership are very unhappy about the fact that the sun will become the heir, because basically the whole revolution was against the monarchy of the Shah, which basically handed leadership to the son and then the grandson. And they're saying, this is not the way we do things. So there is pushback, and there are obviously many different elements within the Iranian leadership. So I'll have to wait and see exactly how this works out, and even if there will be a public sort of coronation of a new leader. Is JL asks, is the revelation about the hacked traffic cameras considered a serious security breach? Was that so-called leak somewhat intentional? I'm assuming it was intentional. What happens usually with these leaks, because there's there's quite a strong censorship or security censorship, army censorship in Israel. Usually these things go abroad and they give it first of all to a foreign paper, and then an Israeli publications can then quote foreign papers, basically circumventing the censor. But usually these something as sensitive as that is probably come up because they want to send a message that they are everywhere. So I'm not sure if it was a serious security breach as much as Israel wanted to send a message about this. So I would assume it was intentional, but again, one doesn't know. Burak Korkmaz, can you give us a time frame for the end of operations? As I kind of laid out in my opening remarks, I think there's really only one person who can give a time frame, or a very small amount of people. And even I don't even think they know exactly, because a lot will depend on what happens on the ground. Either the US or Israel are talking openly. One of the main aims of the operation is regime change. As the Americans say, that's not one of our aims, but it'd be great if that happened. Israel has also hinted along those lines, and I'm sure that's really where they would like to leave it, because any other scenario, whether it's a continuation of this regime, or perhaps some defectors who take control and probably haven't moved the needle too much and will play nice with the West for a while before going back to previous ways, is not what anyone would like to see. So this could take a while. And again, it depends what that means, the end of operations. There will be a point where there'll be less targets to hit. But I think we're talking weeks. I don't think we're talking months. I think we're talking about 2 or 3 weeks maximum. The American public probably won't countenance, and President Trump probably won't have the patience for longer than that. But again, everything will be dictated by facts on the ground, exactly what happens on the ground. It could be that it could be over in days. Again, everything is really moving extremely fast. Every day, the regime is getting weaker and weaker. We haven't seen that inflection point where we see the regime to the point where we can see it teetering at the moment. But again, that could come in the coming days. But the signs are not there yet. But certainly, as I laid out, Israel and the US are weakening the regime by the day, certainly militarily. But whether they are at the point where the people can take over the country and what that looks like exactly, we're not there. But I think we'll start to see signs whether that is going to happen or not in the coming days. So I think we're talking about weeks. I don't think we're talking about days, and I don't think we're talking about months. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time and your questions. And I hope to see you next week. Hopefully, things will look even more optimistic, and we'll be able to give you even more good news of what's happening on the ground in Iran. So have a good week, and thank you very much.